My wife mocked. You can't afford a lawyer. But in court, my brother, estranged for 5 years, appeared to save me. He's the state's most feared attorney. He doesn't have to afford me. I'm his older brother. That line shattered her plan. Her affair and hidden assets exposed. She lost everything, and our bond was reborn. My wife, Evelyn, delivered her ultimatum last Tuesday, not with a sigh, not with a tear, but with the chilling finality of a corporate restructuring. We sat in the living room, a space we had meticulously transformed over 8 years into a sanctuary filled with the scent of sawdust and fresh bread, a tangible testament to our shared dreams. But her words that day stripped away every layer of warmth and turned it into a sterile courtroom. "It's over, Tom," she declared, her voice devoid of any warmth, as she placed a slim file folder on the polished oak coffee table I had crafted with my own hands. "I've already consulted a lawyer. These are my terms." I didn't need to open the folder. Her self-assured smile, a predatory glint in her eyes, told me everything I needed to know. She was more than eager to articulate her demands, each one a calculated blow. She wanted the house, the very home my grandfather had helped me secure the down payment for, a place where he and I had spent countless hours in the small workshop, teaching me the honest trade of woodworking. She wanted 70% of our shared savings, the nest egg we had diligently built, one careful deposit at a time. And, most galling of all, she demanded spousal support for a minimum of 5 years. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a unilateral declaration of war, an unconditional surrender demanded of me. When she finished, she leaned back against the plush velvet sofa, a smug, triumphant smirk twisting her lips. "And I don't want to fight on this, Tom," she said, her voice dripping with a condescending pity that stung more than any shout. "Let's be realistic. You're a high school woodshop teacher. You make a decent living, I'll grant you that. But you cannot afford a real lawyer. My guy will bury you in legal fees before you even see the inside of a courtroom. Your entire life is worth no more than the dirty sawdust you sweep off your floor. It's better for you to just agree to the terms and walk away." I sat there, frozen, staring at the woman I had once loved, the woman with whom I had envisioned a lifetime. The coldness that settled over me was profound, deeper than any winter chill. She didn't just want to leave me. She wanted to obliterate me. She saw me as weak, an insignificant obstacle to be crushed and discarded without a second thought. Her greatest weapon, she believed, was my perceived inability to retaliate, my lack of financial muscle. The silence in the room stretched, heavy and suffocating. It was a silence filled with the echoes of shattered promises and unspoken contempt. Finally, I met her gaze, my face a carefully constructed mask of resignation. I uttered the two words she was so eagerly expecting to hear, words that felt like ash in my mouth. "You're right." The relief that flooded her features was instantaneous and palpable. Her smirk widened. She had won. The humble, simple teacher wasn't going to put up a fight. She stood up, smoothing down the imaginary wrinkles on her expensive silk skirt. "Good," she said, her voice bright with satisfaction. "I'm glad you're being sensible about this. You'll be served with the official papers next week." With that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving me alone in the shell of what was once our home, a bitter wind whipping through the void she had created. Evelyn, with her keen, calculating mind, understood my world intimately. She knew I was a man of simple means, a craftsman who found solace in the honest scent of wood and the methodical rhythm of my workshop. She knew that tens of thousands of dollars for a protracted legal battle were as foreign to my bank account as the idea of abandoning a half-finished project. She also knew about Marcus, my older brother. What she understood, and what she was banking her entire future on, was the impenetrable wall of silence that had stood between Marcus and me for 5 excruciating years. Marcus was no teacher. Marcus was a force of nature, a legal leviathan. Without hyperbole, he was the most feared and prohibitively expensive divorce attorney in the state, a legal predator whose very name sent shivers down the spines of opposing counsel. His reputation was carved from the ruins of countless legal battles, a testament to his ruthless efficiency and surgical precision in dismantling lives. And he was, for all intents and purposes, no longer a part of my life. Our estrangement had begun in the cruel aftermath of our parents' deaths. Catalyst was the family home, the house where we had shared childhood secrets and scraped knees. I, the sentimental fool, wanted to preserve it, to keep it as a sacred memory, a tangible anchor for our fragmented family. I envisioned future gatherings, the echoes of laughter filling its halls once more. Marcus, ever the pragmatist, saw only an illiquid asset, a financial burden. He advocated for its immediate sale, the division of the proceeds, and a swift and sentimental move forward. Our argument had been bitter, A terrible clash of opposing philosophies that left us stranded on opposite sides of a vast canyon of stubborn pride and unresolved grief. We hadn't exchanged a single word since. Evelyn had witnessed the dying embers of that familial fallout. She had seen me, in her strategic calculation, completely and permanently isolated from the only truly powerful person in my family. She had confidently concluded that my greatest potential asset was, in fact, a dead one, a weapon rendered utterly useless by a long-standing personal vendetta. She was profoundly, catastrophically wrong. For 3 days after Evelyn's chilling declaration, I found myself adrift in a dark, suffocating fog. She had been right about one thing. I couldn't possibly afford to fight her, not on her terms. The sheer thought of losing my home, the tangible legacy of my grandfather's love and labor, the savings I had meticulously built, everything I had worked so tirelessly for, pressed down on me like a physical weight, threatening to crush the very air from my lungs. It was a dense, suffocating despair that seeped into every corner of my being. On the fourth day, as the gray dawn bled reluctantly into the sky, I hit rock bottom with a resounding thud. The feeling was not one of release, but of utter, desolate emptiness. Yet, paradoxically, from that absolute nadir, there was only one direction left to go: up. It was a cold, hard truth, a desperate spark in the impenetrable darkness. With a deep, shuddering breath, I swallowed every single ounce of my pride, a stubborn, unyielding pride that had cost me the profound connection with my brother for 5 agonizing years. It was a bitter pill, but a necessary one. My hands, trembling not with fear, but with the monumental weight of my decision, reached for an old, leather-bound address book, buried deep beneath layers of forgotten documents and memories. I found his private cell phone number, a lifeline I had long believed severed, a last resort I had sworn I would never need. It was a number that represented both my deepest shame and my glimmer of desperate hope. My hand, slick with nervous sweat, trembled perceptibly as I dialed the number. I half expected it to go straight to voicemail, a sterile digital barrier, or perhaps to be answered by the crisp, disembodied voice of a sharp-tongued assistant. But after 2 excruciatingly long rings, a familiar, deep baritone filled my ear. "Hello, Marcus." "Hello, Marcus," I managed, my own voice sounding strangely weak and foreign, a mere whisper in the vast canyon of our shared silence. "It's Tom." A long, heavy pause stretched between us, thick with 5 years of unspoken words, unresolved anger, and lingering regret. For a terrifying moment, I truly believed he would simply hang up, severing this fragile lifeline before it had even fully formed. Then, a sigh, barely audible, followed by an old, almost forgotten nickname. "Tommy," he finally said, the word a relic from a time when our lives were intertwined, now sounding utterly surreal after so many years. "What's wrong?" And then, it all came pouring out of me, a torrent of humiliation, anger, and desperation. The words tumbled over each other, a raw, unfiltered confession. I told him everything. Evelyn's cold declaration, her predatory demands for the house and our savings, the callous cruelty of her lawyer, and the chilling, condescending pity in her voice. Finally, I choked out her ultimate, arrogant taunt, the one that had cut me to the quick. "You can't afford a lawyer to fight me." Another silence, this one even longer, more profoundly unsettling than the last. But when Marcus finally spoke, his voice was utterly transformed. The initial surprise was gone, replaced by something I hadn't heard in years, a primal, protective instinct that resonated with the memory of a fierce older brother. It was the sound of steel, honed and lethal. "She said." "What?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet, each syllable a precisely weighted threat. I repeated her words, the bitter taste still fresh in my mouth. "Okay," he said, the single word a chilling pronouncement. "When and where is the first court appearance?" "Next Tuesday, at the downtown courthouse," I told him, my heart now pounding with a frantic rhythm. "I'll clear my schedule," he stated, his voice now devoid of any emotion, a calm before a devastating storm. "Don't talk to her. Don't talk to her lawyer. Don't sign anything. Just show up on Tuesday. I'll meet you there." The line clicked dead. I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear, my heart hammering a furious drumbeat against my ribs. A terrifying hope, cold and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel, began to bloom in the sterile silence of the room. Evelyn thought she had disarmed me, left me vulnerable and defeated. She had no idea. In her arrogance, she had not only pushed me to the brink but had, in effect, handed me a nuclear weapon. The morning of the preliminary hearing dawned miserable and gray, a fitting backdrop for the weight that pressed upon my shoulders. Rain lashed against the windows of my old sedan as I drove towards the downtown courthouse, each drop a chilling reminder of the storm brewing in my life. I walked into the imposing building alone, feeling every inch the defeated man Evelyn expected me to be, a solitary figure swallowed by the cold grandeur of the legal system. My only suit, the one typically reserved for weddings or funerals, and this felt like a morbid blend of both, hung heavily on my frame, a costume of quiet despair. The designated courtroom was a sterile, impersonal chamber, permeated by the stale scent of old paper, polished wood, and the lingering, almost palpable aroma of anxiety. Evelyn was already there, seated at the plaintiff's table, radiating an almost insolent confidence. She looked meticulously put together, a vision of corporate ruthlessness in a sharp, dark blue power suit, her hair styled to immaculate perfection. Her expression was one of triumphant certainty, a sophisticated predator's smile playing on her lips, ready for a decisive takeover. Beside her sat her lawyer, a man in his 50s with a neatly trimmed silver beard and a self-satisfied smirk permanently etched onto his face. He exuded an air of smug superiority. They were engaged in quiet, conspiratorial laughter as I walked in, their heads close together. Evelyn saw me then, and for a fleeting second, her victorious smile faltered, replaced by a momentary flash of pity, a condescending, dismissive pity that cut deeper than any insult. She had likely anticipated a more broken, more visibly devastated man, but I simply met her gaze, my own expression a blank, unreadable mask, and walked with measured steps to the defendant's table. I sat down, placing my old, scuffed leather briefcase, a stark contrast to her lawyer's gleaming accessory, on the table. And then I waited. Her lawyer, whose name I vaguely recalled as Alan Davis, rose from his seat with a theatrical flourish and sauntered over, his gait oozing with patronizing confidence. "Mr. Miller," he began, his voice a smooth, oily purr, laced with an almost tangible condescension. "I'm genuinely pleased to see you're here. I trust you've had ample time to review my client's very generous proposal. If you're prepared to sign today, we can expedite this process, making it quick and, dare I say, painless for all involved." He offered a practiced, insincere smile. "I'm waiting for my counsel," I replied quietly, my voice barely above a whisper, yet firm enough to carry. He actually chuckled, a short, dismissive burst of air. "Your counsel? Good luck with that, Mr. Miller. Let's not draw this out unnecessarily." He turned with an exaggerated sigh, clearly impatient with my defiance, and walked back to his table, sharing another knowing glance with Evelyn. Their smiles had returned, radiating smug assurance. The bailiff, a burly man with a no-nonsense demeanor, called the court to order. The judge, a stern-faced woman with an air of absolute authority, entered and took her seat on the bench. She scanned the docket with a practiced eye. "Miller versus Miller," she announced, her voice echoing with judicial gravitas. "Are both parties present and represented?" Evelyn's lawyer, Alan Davis, stood up, his posture radiating confidence. "Yes, Your Honor." Alan Davis representing the plaintiff, Mrs. Evelyn Miller. The judge's gaze shifted to me, expectant. Before I could utter a single word, before the silence could fully settle, the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a resounding, almost violent thud. Every head in the room, including mine, swiveled in unison. Walking down the aisle, with an almost unnerving calm amidst the sudden hush, was my brother, Marcus Sterling. He wasn't merely wearing a suit. He was clad in an armor tailored from what looked like spun midnight and pure, unadulterated intimidation. Each stride was deliberate, imbued with the predatory grace of a panther, his expensive leather briefcase swinging with quiet menace at his side. A visible ripple of whispers, a collective gasp of recognition, spread through the courtroom as other lawyers and court staff, their faces paling, recognized the notorious figure. His fearsome reputation, whispered in hushed tones across the state, had truly preceded him. Marcus didn't spare a glance for anyone else in the crowded room. His eyes, sharp and unwavering, were fixed solely on me, a beacon in the storm. He walked directly to my table, a figure of formidable purpose. His hand, strong and reassuring, settled on my shoulder, giving it a gentle, almost imperceptible squeeze, a silent acknowledgement, a promise of protection. Then, with a definitive, almost ceremonial click that echoed ominously in the suddenly silent room, he sat down beside me, placing his gleaming, obsidian-black briefcase on the table, a stark contrast to my worn one. I stole a glance at Evelyn. The smug, triumphant expression that had been so firmly plastered across her face just moments before had been utterly wiped clean. It was replaced by a mask of utter, horrified disbelief, as if she had just witnessed a ghost materialize and take a seat at the opposing counsel's table. Her jaw had gone slack, her eyes wide and unblinking, fixed on Marcus with a terror that seemed to pierce her very soul. Her lawyer, Alan Davis, looked even worse. The color had completely drained from his face, leaving it a sickly pale, and his customary smirk was gone, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated terror. The kind that grips a minnow suddenly confronted by a great white shark. He knew, with an undeniable certainty, exactly who my brother was. Marcus leaned closer to me, his presence a shield against the stunned silence of the courtroom, utterly ignoring the sea of awestruck faces. "Sorry I'm late, little brother," he whispered, a hint of a dangerous smile playing on his lips. Traffic was hell. Then he straightened up, his demeanor instantly shifting to one of cold, unwavering professionalism. He turned his gaze, sharp and commanding, directly towards the judge. "Marcus Sterling, Your Honor," he announced, his voice a commanding baritone that filled the room, leaving no doubt as to his authority. "Representing the defendant, Mr. Thomas Miller." The judge's eyebrows, previously stern and unmoving, shot up in a clear display of surprise. She knew the name. Everyone in that room did. Then, slowly, deliberately, Marcus turned his gaze towards Evelyn, his eyes, dark and piercing, locking onto hers. He looked at her, then at her terrified lawyer, a chilling, predatory smile, more a baring of teeth than an expression of mirth, gracing his lips. "My apologies for the delay," he said, his voice dripping with an exaggerated, almost mocking politeness, each word a carefully placed barb. Then, his eyes, still fixed on Evelyn, narrowed just slightly, and he delivered the line that not only shattered her entire world but reverberated through the stunned courtroom. "He doesn't have to afford me. I'm his older brother." The statement hung in the air, thick with unspoken meaning. An anvil dropped onto Evelyn's meticulously constructed reality. The game had not just changed, it had been utterly, irrevocably obliterated. Evelyn, who had sauntered into that courtroom expecting a swift, unconditional surrender, had instead walked directly into a perfectly executed ambush. Her calculated certainty, her smug assurance, evaporated into thin air, replaced by a cold, sickening dread, with the dramatic flair of a seasoned warrior preparing for battle. Marcus opened his gleaming briefcase. He pulled out a thick stack of files, their edges crisp and new, and with that silent gesture, the demolition began. He immediately rejected all of Evelyn's initial demands, dismissing them not merely as unreasonable, but as openly predatory and filed in blatant bad faith. Then, in a voice that left no room for argument, he announced our unequivocal intention to file a counterpetition. He declared that we would be seeking a full forensic audit of all marital assets and expenditures, meticulously tracing every financial transaction for the last 3 years, leaving no stone unturned, no hidden account unexamined. Furthermore, he stated, with a chilling calmness that belied the brutality of the demand, that we would be demanding Evelyn herself pay for all of Tom's legal fees, a direct, devastating retort to her earlier taunt. Evelyn's lawyer, Alan Davis, stood there, utterly paralyzed, his jaw working uselessly, stammering incoherent syllables. He was a bewildered minnow who had, in his hubris, just found himself cornered by a great white shark. The battle, for all intents and purposes, was over before it had even truly begun. A single, chilling sentence from a protective older brother had sealed Evelyn's fate. The 2 months that followed that initial court appearance were nothing short of a legal blitzkrieg. My brother Marcus, true to his nature, does not do things by halves. He doesn't just practice law. He wages war. Evelyn and her esteemed lawyer, Alan Davis, had arrogantly believed they could roll over me, the humble woodshop teacher, with minimal effort and maximum gain. Instead, they found themselves squarely on the receiving end of a relentless, systematic, and utterly devastating assault. Marcus's strategy was simple, brutal, and effective. Dismantle Evelyn's carefully constructed facade piece by painful piece. His first move was to file a motion for discovery that was, by all accounts, a masterpiece of legal terror. It wasn't a mere request for documents. It was an uncompromising demand for every single financial record Evelyn had ever touched over the last 5 years. Bank statements, credit card bills, work expense reports, Venmo transactions, even the most insignificant coffee receipts, everything. It was a dragnet designed to ensnare every hidden detail. Her lawyer, reeling from the initial shock, predictably filed a motion to have Marcus's demand dismissed, protesting that it was overly broad, harassing, and an invasion of privacy. However, the judge, a pragmatic woman who had clearly taken the measure of my brother's formidable reputation, took one look at Marcus's meticulously crafted justification for the exhaustive discovery, a justification that laid bare the potential for fraudulent intent, and swiftly approved our motion in full. Evelyn was now legally obligated to turn over everything. She had prided herself on being clever, on having meticulously hidden her tracks. She had no idea she was dealing with a man who, for sport, employed a dedicated team of forensic accountants, while Evelyn found herself drowning in an ocean of paperwork. desperately trying to unearth and organize a lifetime of financial secrets. Marcus moved on to her personally, turning his laser-focused attention to her social and professional circles. He scheduled a grueling series of depositions, not just with Evelyn, but with her closest friends, her unsuspecting family members, and even a few carefully selected colleagues from her workplace. His strategy was deceptively simple, yet utterly ruthless. Apply an unyielding, multi-pronged pressure from all sides until the brittle facade of her lies began to crack, and the undeniable truth was squeezed out, drop by agonizing drop. Marcus understood that people, even loyal ones, had their breaking points when confronted with relentless, calculated scrutiny. He was not interested in emotional outbursts. He was interested in facts, in inconsistencies, in the precise mechanisms of deceit. Evelyn, still grappling with the sheer volume of financial documents Marcus had demanded, found herself caught in a different kind of trap. A web of personal betrayals and carefully hidden secrets that Marcus was systematically unraveling. Each deposition was a tightening of the noose, slowly but surely cutting off her avenues of escape. The air around her, once thick with the scent of triumph, was now heavy with the suffocating dread of exposure. The breakthrough, as Marcus had meticulously planned, came during the deposition of Evelyn's best friend, a woman named Chloe. Chloe, fiercely loyal to Evelyn for years, was nonetheless no match for my brother's surgical precision. He was polite, charming, and utterly ruthless, a velvet glove concealing an iron fist. For 3 relentless hours, he probed, gently at first, then with increasing intensity, about Evelyn's extravagant spending habits, her frequent work trips, and her general happiness, or profound lack thereof, in our marriage. He charted a careful course, meticulously building a foundation of facts, observations, and subtle inconsistencies. Then, with the timing of a master strategist, he delivered the question that tore the case wide open. A precise, devastating blow. "Miss Albright," Marcus began, his voice calm, almost conversational. "Can you tell me about Mr. David Kincaid?" I saw Chloe flinch, a sharp, involuntary tremor that ran through her frame. The name was utterly unfamiliar to me, a sudden, jarring discord in the symphony of my ruined life. Marcus simply waited, a predator patiently observing its cornered prey, allowing the silence to stretch, heavy with unspoken truths. Chloe, flustered, attempted to play dumb, stammering denials and vague assertions of ignorance. But Marcus, unfazed, merely produced a thick stack of credit card statements from a card I never knew Evelyn possessed, a phantom card, secretly linked to our joint savings account, an account she had been systematically siphoning money from for over a year, carefully draining it like a slow, silent leak. He pointed to a series of undeniable charges, each one a nail in Evelyn's coffin. A lavish hotel in the exclusive wine country, exquisite jewelry from a high-end boutique whose prices would make a king wince, and expensive dinners for 2 at restaurants I could never afford. "Miss Miller," Marcus stated, his voice a cold, irrefutable factual pronouncement, was supposedly on a work conference on these precise dates. However, her employer has unequivocally confirmed no such conference ever existed. And, Miss Albright, you were demonstrably not with her. So I ask you again, under the penalty of perjury, who is David Kincaid? Chloe broke. The carefully constructed wall of loyalty crumbled under the crushing weight of Marcus's evidence and the looming threat of legal repercussions. Her voice trembling, she admitted it. David Kincaid was the man Evelyn had been having a clandestine affair with for the last 18 months. He was a wealthy, charismatic real estate developer she had met through her old job, a man who represented the upgraded life she so desperately craved. It all clicked into place with a sickening clarity. The secrecy, the cold, calculated financial demands, Evelyn's unshakable, almost arrogant confidence. She wasn't just leaving me. She was leaving me for someone else, a perceived upgrade. Her entire treacherous plan was to strip mine our marriage for every possible asset, a calculated plundering to finance her lavish future with her new lover. Her intention was to use my hard-earned money, the fruits of my honest labor, to fund her future, a future built on lies and betrayal. The subsequent deposition of her lover, David, proved even more illuminating. He was, as expected, a smug, arrogant man, puffed up by his wealth and his illicit affair. But his carefully cultivated arrogance crumbled and shattered under the relentless, surgical questioning of Marcus. He admitted to the affair, his voice cracking under the pressure. He confessed that he and Evelyn had meticulously planned the divorce together, each detail a malicious twist of the knife. He even revealed that it was his idea, his suggestion, for Evelyn to demand the house and the exorbitant spousal support. Tom, he had confidently told her, would be too poor, too weak, and too utterly broken to ever fight back. They had underestimated me. More crucially, they had catastrophically underestimated my family, the silent, powerful force they believed I had lost. With these devastating depositions, Evelyn's case was not merely weakened, it was annihilated. She had committed perjury in her initial filings by falsely claiming she was a faithful wife. She had deliberately hidden assets and embezzled marital funds. She was not just a liar. She was a calculated fraud, exposed for all to see. Her lawyer, Alan Davis, his earlier smirk replaced by an expression of utter defeat, called Marcus, practically begging to settle. He claimed Evelyn was willing to drop all her demands and simply walk away, to disappear quietly into the night. Marcus's reply was not merely cold. It was glacial, a pronouncement delivered from an unassailable height. No, he stated, his voice devoid of any warmth or compromise. Walking away is a privilege she has not earned. We are not settling. We are going to court, and we are going to burn her to the ground. His words were not a threat, but a promise, delivered with the quiet, terrifying certainty of an executioner. Evelyn, through her frantic, desperate lawyer, had offered a flimsy olive branch, hoping to escape the consequences of her monstrous betrayal. But Marcus, ever the strategist, saw it as an attempt to evade the true cost of her actions. Her lies, her fraud, her calculated cruelty, these were not to be brushed aside with a quiet settlement. She had wanted a fight, a one-sided massacre where I was the lamb led to slaughter. Now she would have won. A battle on Marcus's terms. A battle she was destined to lose spectacularly. She had sought to strip me bare, to leave me with nothing but the dust of my broken dreams. But now, it was she who stood on the precipice of losing everything. The final act of this devastating drama was about to unfold, and Evelyn, for all her arrogance, had no idea just how utterly consumed she was about to become by the flames of her own making. It has been 6 months since I first walked into that sterile courtroom, a man convinced he had lost everything that mattered. Today, I can unequivocally tell you that I was wrong. I didn't lose anything that truly mattered. In fact, I gained it all back, and more. The final court date was a mere formality, a conclusive chapter in Evelyn's self-written downfall. Faced with the insurmountable mountain of evidence Marcus had meticulously amassed against her, the damning depositions, the irrefutable forensic accounting reports, the undeniable proof of her sordid affair, and her blatant conspiracy to commit fraud, Evelyn had no choice but to surrender completely. Her once unshakable confidence shattered into a million pieces. Her lawyer, Alan Davis, now a pale, visibly exhausted shadow of his former smug self, advised her, with a tone of utter defeat, to accept any terms we offered. And the terms my brother Marcus had drafted were nothing short of brutal, a surgical dismantling of her entire existence. Evelyn didn't just walk away with nothing. She walked away with less than nothing. She was forced to relinquish any and all claims to the house, the home my grandfather had helped me acquire, the very symbol of my family's legacy. Her demand for spousal support, once delivered with such sneering confidence, was dismissed with prejudice, a permanent blot on her legal record. And because Marcus, with his relentless precision, was able to prove that she had spent over $60,000 of marital assets, our money, our shared future, on her illicit affair, on lavish hotels, expensive gifts, and luxurious vacations with her lover, the judge unequivocally ordered that staggering amount to be deducted from her minuscule share of our remaining savings and returned directly to me. She left the marriage with a mere fraction of her original, audacious demands, burdened by a mountain of her own exorbitant legal bills, and utterly humiliated by the public exposure of her entire sordid scheme in a court of law. Her meticulously crafted facade of respectability had been stripped away, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. The fallout in her personal life was just as devastating, a ripple effect of her own making. Her lover, David Kincaid, a man who, like Evelyn, was attracted solely to winners and status, faced with the legal and social consequences of his own complicity, dumped her almost immediately. He wanted nothing to do with the spectacular public defeat she had just suffered. Her circle of friends, many of whom had been forced to testify about her lies under oath, quickly distanced themselves, their loyalty evaporating faster than smoke. She lost her fiancé, her home, her savings, her lover, and her reputation, all in one devastating, self-inflicted fell swoop, all because she had so profoundly underestimated the quiet man she had married, and, more critically, the family he was prepared to fight for. But the real story, the most significant and transformative part of this entire harrowing chapter, was what transpired between my brother and me. A few weeks after the divorce was finally formalized, a process that felt more like an exorcism than a legal proceeding, Marcus called me. "Meet me at the old house," he said, his voice softer than I had heard it in years, a rare glimpse beneath his formidable exterior. I drove out to our parents' home, the house that had been the unwitting source of our stupid, stubborn, 5-year feud. It stood there, weathered but proud, a silent sentinel of our shared history. I found him on the porch, not pacing, not strategizing, but simply sitting on the worn wooden steps, gazing out at the overgrown garden. We didn't talk about the brutal case, the meticulous dismantling of Evelyn's lies. We didn't talk about Evelyn at all. Instead, we talked about Dad's notoriously terrible fishing trips, the ones where he always came home empty-handed, but full of exaggerated stories. We reminisced about Mom's amazing apple pie, the scent of cinnamon and warm apples still vivid in our memories. We talked about being kids again, about scraped knees and whispered secrets, about the simple, uncomplicated joy of shared laughter. Finally, after a long, comfortable silence, the kind that only brothers who have traversed a deep chasm can truly share, he looked at me, his eyes softening. "I was wrong, Tommy," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper, a profound confession from a man rarely prone to vulnerability. "I was so focused on the money, on the asset, the cold, hard numbers. I forgot what this place truly was. It's our home." "I was wrong, too," I confessed, the words a gentle balm to a long festering wound. I was so stubbornly stuck in the past, so afraid of change, that I wasn't willing to see that maybe there was a different future for this place, a different way to honor its memories. We didn't sell the house. We decided, together, to keep it. We've spent the last few weekends out there, side by side, tools in hand, repairing the porch that had started to sag, painting the rooms with fresh, hopeful colors, slowly but surely breathing new life back into its old bones. It's no longer a somber memorial to a past that caused us so much pain. It's a vibrant project for our future, a place for our family, the real one, the one that truly understands and loves me, to gather once more, to create new memories that honor the old. The scent of fresh lumber and paint, mingling with the old, familiar smell of aged wood, feels like a healing balm, slowly wrapping around the past hurts and stitching them back together. Working side by side with my brother, sharing the quiet camaraderie of shared labor, has healed a wound I honestly believed would remain an ugly, permanent scar forever. Evelyn's parting shot, her contemptuous declaration that I couldn't afford a lawyer, was meant to cripple me, to leave me isolated and utterly defenseless. Her greed, her staggering arrogance, her unwavering belief that I was weak, alone, and easily discarded, that very belief, that venomous taunt, was the precise thing that forced me to make the call. The call that brought my brother, my formidable, loving brother, back into my life. She thought she was isolating me, stripping me of every support. Instead, in her blind selfishness, she unwittingly reunited me with the most important family I have. She tried to leave me with absolutely nothing. But as I stand here today, my home secure, my brother by my side, and my heart finally whole, I realize Evelyn inadvertently gave me everything.